So my biggest advice to anybody listening to this, any young person, like, hear people out, hear people's stories. Even if they're right or wrong, just hear them out. Like, it's another perspective. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Backrow Boys. I'm your host, Ebby Matthew. I got my boys, Chris Matthew and Stan Phillip. We are the #1 podcast in the community. So thank you so much for liking, subscribing, listening, and viewing our videos, our past and present, and definitely our future ones. Hey, we want to take this time to continue to encourage you guys to share our videos, watch our videos, pass it on to your friends and families. We got some good content out there. Hey, fellas, how's it going? I haven't talked to you in a minute. You guys have a good Thanksgiving?
A lot of turkey, a lot of mac and cheese, you know what I'm saying? It was good.
Yeah, dude, I had Thanksgiving food, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Like I felt so disgusting on Friday, but it was good on Thursday. But when I woke up, I was like, my stomach was hurting. I remember my mom had to give me some like ginger to kind of calm my stomach.
Hey, I'm glad you guys had a good Thanksgiving. Dude, so here's a funny little story. So I'm not gonna say this guy's name, but you guys may know him. But there's a dude named he's from New York, and
you almost said his name.
Like, you may know this dude.
Yeah, this dude, he texted me yesterday. He's from New York. He goes to the Martha Church there, and I knew him from like old like national leadership and regional conferences or whatever. And he's like cousins with one of our friends here at the Carrollton Church. He like randomly texted me, and I'm just watching the Mavs and Warriors game last night. And he goes, "Hey Eb, like I miss you so much, man. I haven't talked to you forever." I'm like, "The hell?" Like I was like, "I haven't talked to this guy in forever." And I was like, "Oh, a long time. How you been?" And we're both married. Like he's married, I'm married. I'm like, "Oh, how's everything going?" He goes, "Good, man, good." And he starts saying like, "Yeah, man, I still live pretty close by to your cousin Tina in New York." I was like, "What? How do you know my cousin Tina?" And then I started remembering like, man, I guess he knew. I forgot he knew a little bit of my family and all that stuff in New York. And then I was like, "Oh yeah, you still go to the Martha Church?" He goes, "Yeah, dude, still very active and still going." I'm like, "Oh, cool." He goes, "What about you, man?" I'm like, "Not as much. A lot of our guys like left the church and they're not really like there. Like they moved or different churches now." And then after that, he just stopped talking to me. I was like, "Damn."
After you found out you're not Martha anymore.
Yeah, I was like, yeah, I don't really go to church anymore. Yeah, but isn't that crazy? Like, I feel like I hear that a lot I guess we can only talk about our region or our Dallas area because I know a lot of people, they randomly just ask me like, "Oh, hey, how are you and your wife doing? What church y'all go to?" Or like, "How often do you go to church?" And for us, we do go to church every Sunday. We just make time, even if we're tired or whatever. We just go. I've noticed like in our community or whatever, like a lot of people are not going in a sense. So it's kind of funny. I mean, not funny, but it's kind of interesting. So
You think it's because it's so much like Malayalam services too, especially, I know it used to alternate like English, Malayalam. I think still like the big churches it does. I know, Crossways like English every Sunday, right? So I think they're trying to combat that. But I think initially that's one reason why people started going because they're like, Malayalam service, like I don't understand Malayalam at all. Like, what's the point of me even coming? Might as well go to a different church. And actually, a lot of my friends, like their parents were very open even from the beginning, especially like we're all Martha, right? We grew up Martha. And I know like even growing up, I had a lot of my friends and their parents actually left the Martha church and went to some of these other like Watermark or some other like non-denominational churches from like the very beginning, like left Martha church and went kind of that route too. But again, I think our group is different because we still grew up within the Martha Church, and a lot of us didn't leave until we got married or until we were old enough to kind of make our own decisions with kind of our parents' decisions.
It's pretty wild because like I feel like I'm so biased with our community, with our like Martha Church, like with us three where we grew up, because like I feel like we had the best of the best. Like all these other churches had like these huge, mega youth groups with like 400 people, and they had like everything you ever wanted, right? But like I always feel like with our group, it's like it was so intimate. We were all close with each other. Like every age group knew each other. But that was the cool thing. It was so much fun growing up in that church and just going to practices together. Like going to random regional conference. I mean, dude, can you remember all the times we had a regional conference where all the times when it was free time and it was time to play basketball, all the guys wore their stuff and it was like Martha tournament, like preview or whatever. Man.
Yeah. Now I feel like our church had like the best of all or everything, right? Because it's like our church wasn't too big, so you got to know everybody. We were all pretty chill with each other. But it wasn't like too small either. And we were like, we played sports, we joked around, we hung out with each other outside of church. It was good spiritually too. Like, I don't know, it was good times. But yeah, I feel like people don't go to church now. Like, I mean, I don't know. I think COVID also impacted it, because that's like one reason we watch on church online a lot now, just because like I feel like COVID kind of made us do that a little bit. And I also feel like now we have like a little bit of social anxiety, so like we sometimes when I go, I'm like, like I just want to watch at home, so it's easier. But then, I don't know, I wonder if people like I know some of the mega churches, they get like really political and stuff, so I wonder if that turns people off or if that turns people on. I don't know, maybe people like the political side of stuff, but
That's a
I don't
crazy.
know.
Have you been to some of these general body meetings? Like these general body meetings are crazy. I remember one time, like my church here, I went to like a general body meeting. It's like I was in college for a while, and I was going to church down there. And then like one weekend I came back. It had been like so long since I've been to church up here because I was going to go to church down there. And then when I came to church up here, it happened to be a general body meeting. And literally like hands were thrown. Like there's literally like a fight that happened. I was like, oh my God. And I remember like I punched one of my friends in the stomach and ran. I was like, I just wanted to be involved. But it's crazy. Like they were like cussing each other out, name calling. I was like, my goodness. Like, and again, a lot of it got personal too. But it's crazy how, like you were saying, it can get like political, but it can get personal. There's so much like drama that unfortunately can happen in the church too. Isn't that crazy?
I was gonna say that's like the crazy thing with Indian people, because it's like when we don't really like, we're so like non-confrontational, but then when we start fighting, all this shit comes out. It's like you did this to me that one time, you did that, and then it just goes from like, it could be like a simple, like, general body is not supposed to be in that intense at times, but it can go from something small where the person like finally ticks you off, and then it's just boom, just like an explosion. So that's crazy.
Dude, it's a great. I mean, it's for both of y'all touch on the politics side. So in American churches, from what I've heard from my friends, is that there's politics in there, but it's very kept enclosed. Like it's kind of like a company. Like they have their board members. They talk about whatever problems they have within their little teams, and then they spread and try to fix it. Where it's not a dramatic thing. But the Indian church, it's like I've noticed the one issue, and this is just my opinion from growing up in the Indian church, is that I don't like the idea of every year people change positions. Like a lot of times in American church, they hold that position for like 3 or 4 years. And so like it kind of is contained. Any issues are dealt with these 4 or 5 people. But then with like Indian church, it's like it keeps rotating. So everyone knows like the accounts, everyone knows the drama, everyone knows this. And with these general body meetings, this is just letting the people know, hey, this is what we're doing, or this is what we're moving towards, right? Dude, Indian people, these uncles and aunties got so freaking crazy. They're like, no, we don't want to do that. F that. Like, well, I mean, no, we're just letting y'all know. We're not asking y'all's opinion. But then it got into like, remember the whole Grand Prairie days, all the fights and police was called and stuff like that. And I'm only saying the name of this church because it's gone now. Because it's okay.
American churches, like most of the staff get paid too, right? So is that like the reason why like they're on longer? Because like in India it was all like voluntary too.
Yeah, it's their position. Like it's their...
Well, there's some that I guess there's some certain positions at the Indian church where like there's things you have to go to in India. And I guess like if you're that member or that position, you get like pretty much a free ride to India every year. So some people want it. I've heard that like some people want that position just so they can go to India, of course, to do what they need to do for the church, but then just to do whatever else they need to, kind of like not a free vacation, but kind of like a free vacation.
Yeah, like a business trip.
Business trip, yeah.
For me, man, like I'm for all the listeners and viewers out there, I'm not saying this about every Indian uncle and auntie that go to church or whatever, or go to the Indian church, but I feel like a lot of them do it for like a showing off kind of reason, where like if they're in certain positions because they want to feel that power or whatever. Trust me, there are a lot of uncles and aunties that go because they're super spiritual. They're they pray, and that's awesome. Continue. I hope there's still people that do that, but it's like one thing I never liked is that certain people always, I noticed, did things to just show off or to do something to get a reaction from other people or whatever. So I don't know, but in a growing up sense, I feel like we had a great like childhood, a youth group experience. I can't say anything bad about it. Like I don't know how y'all feel about that.
I think we had a great community. I think that's the one thing where I always look back and I would want my kids to grow up within like the Martha Church or like an Indian community, because I feel like that community that we had is kind of unmatched. I just don't think that we would, and again, I may be wrong because I've never experienced that, but I don't think we would have the same kind of bonds that at like an American church that we had kind of within the Indian church. Because I had a lot of friends growing up that went to an American church, and I feel like their friendships aren't as strong as like our friendships. So I think like we consider ourselves as like brothers for the most part. Like we were at each other's place like every single day. We had the same like commonalities, things like that. I feel like those guys really only see each other on Sundays, if they went to the same school, maybe, or like BBS. I feel like those are kind of the two big things. But I feel like it was part of our life where like we go to church. It wasn't just like a Sunday and BBS thing. It was like Sunday to Sunday, like 7 days a week. Like we would talk to each other on the phone. Like we became each other's best friends through that community. And the other thing, I'm not going to dwell on it too long, but I think sports actually helped a lot in that too. Because again, all of us grew up playing sports, and I know a lot of these, I guess, youth leagues, there's a lot of kind of youth that only come for sports and they won't come to prayer meetings or things like that. But I don't think that's a bad thing. If I think that's just another way of building community, right? If people are going to build community and kind of do the right things just by doing sports, I don't think that's such a wrong thing. So I think those leaders can still instill those values kind of at practices and things like that, instead of you don't have to be at kind of a prayer meeting to pray. We prayed before like every single practice, I think, right? And then we prayed after practices, thankfully, like no injuries, things like that. So I don't know what y'all's thoughts were on that.
No, I was the same way. Like, I didn't care if, like, because I remember, like, growing up in our church, our older people in our church get so mad, like, oh, you're only coming to church to play basketball, or you're only coming to church to play football. Like, I mean, and I know other churches, like, complain about their older people, like, older guys, let's say, that would just come to play basketball. I'm just like, I mean, at least they're coming, right? Like, that's the whole point, right? So
they tried to instill that pray to play, right? Wasn't that a thing?
Yeah, I feel like when you force things, like just none of us like that, right? Like no one likes to be told what to do and stuff. It makes like the whole faith aspect of it more of like kind of like a chore or something it's not genuine anymore. It's like even if someone comes to these prayer things, they're not coming to like actually want to be there. They're just forced to be there. So they're not like, I know they're just like, oh, this is stupid, whatever, right? But you can go to the fun things, you can just hang out, you can go to basketball and stuff. But there's still an opportunity for someone to like have that faith experience, right? Because like when we went, like we just hung out like at the older guys' place, right? Played 2K, played Madden, and we talked about faith like probably every time we went, just because they were such like good mentors and good people that it was important in their life, so they wanted to talk about it with us. I feel like that's the same thing that you could still do. You don't have to force people to like pray, but you can just, hey, let's play basketball, let's hang out after, get some lunch, dinner, and then see what happens in conversation. Like that's how I would do things, I guess. But
like you said, like it was very organic. Like like those older guys never like forced us to like, hey, did you read your Bible today? And you should. Everyone that's listening, you should read your Bibles, right? Do whatever you have to do. But no, I just feel like it was so organic. Like I feel like your parents take you to church and they kind of, hey, you should go every Sunday, blah blah. But then when you get older, you start like, it's not because of your parents anymore. It's you have to decide, do I want to keep the faith? Or because I mean, I'm not gonna speak for you guys. For me personally, I walked away for a little while because I didn't know what I wanted to do. But then I realized when I didn't have God, like, my life felt a little empty. But let me ask you guys this question: like, were you guys going to church when you guys were younger because you're forced? So your parents were forcing you to go, or you really wanted to, like, had a craving for the faith, or what do you think about that? Like, I'll just throw it to Chris. Like, what do you think about it? Because you were a deacon for like 2 years, right, in church?
Yeah, dude. That little thing. Only Marthos and like people that have liturgical services know what that thing is. But man, I mean, I guess growing up for sure, right? Like when I was younger, but I feel like when I got to college, I started caring more. I didn't really appreciate like the Holy Communion service really until like I got into college, because I started seeing and understanding like the symbolic meaning behind it. I at first, because it's just so repetitive, so you're just kind of like, like, it's kind of like robotic behavior that you're doing. But when I went to college, like I started understanding the meaning of it, and started experiencing different faiths and backgrounds and stuff. So it kind of changed it for me. So I would say when I was growing up, it definitely felt like, oh, I got to be here. It was forced, But I enjoyed like the youth parts of it, right? Like where we had like youth Bible studies, youth hangouts, and that stuff definitely helped me like spiritually.
Stan, what about you?
Yeah, I think in the same way as Chris. So again, growing up, I pay to go to church, right? And as
Yeah.
bad as it is, it's no, it's because my like I was a bad kid growing up, so I know my parents kind of forced me every Sunday to go to church, and I really didn't want to go to church. I was one of those outstanding members again when I was a kid, so not outstanding like I was a great person, outstanding like I was outside, like standing outside. One of the big things I think sports got me to go more. And again, that's I don't think I realized it then, but now like looking back at it, like there's so many lessons and like spiritual things that I learned from kind of that fellowship from sports, that only kind of that going to church like for that thing would have kind of allowed me to do, right? And then same thing with Chris. When you get to college and you're on your own, I think you're kind of see exactly what you want. There's so many different routes that you can take. I remember, I attended, there's like non-denominational churches I attended. I went to some Catholic services up there. I kind of explored, kind of see all the options. I remember one when I was in grad school, one of like the Martho Utchins would come like once a month, and we would like all the Marthos there would kind of get together. We wouldn't have like service, but we'd have like get together and kind of talk with Utchin and things like that. So it's cool to experience kind of all of those things as well. And again, I think that's the thing. When you get older, you kind of appreciate kind of all the different avenues and aspects. But again, the same thing with other faiths and religions too. Like I had friends with different faiths and religions, and I was never one to kind of push people like, hey, you're wrong, I'm right. But it's cool to kind of experience, kind of see all these different viewpoints as well.
Yeah, no, I'm a big fan of that because, like, same thing for me. I had friends in different religions or beliefs than my own, and my biggest thing was like I never wanted to like shove any like Jesus down anyone's throat because I always feel like that was the wrong thing to do, and that's not how you introduce. Like, it's like imagine like with you guys, like if I have a friend named John and like, hey, Chris and Stan, I got this cool guy named John. He's so awesome. He's the best person. He's so funny. And like, hey, you go be his friend. Hey, go hang out with him tomorrow. Like, why would y'all even feel like, oh, okay, he seems like a nice guy, but I don't have time tomorrow. Like, why would I need to go hang out tomorrow? Let me just find my own time. That's how I always felt with like the whole like relationship aspect of like Jesus and like the Bible and stuff like don't force people to do it. I guess like my next like thought I was thinking is like what you guys mentioned both in college. Like that's where like as much as the church, the Martha Church helped me have that foundation, try to figure out what this is. College is when I was like, oh man, I'm about to go buck wild. I'm about to do whatever I want. Like, I don't need to go to church. I don't need to do anything. But that was also a time where like I was trying to figure myself out and like what did I care for? What did I want to do with my life? And also like there was a thing called SALT at that time. It was InterVarsity. And I think Stan, you had one way InterVarsity.
One way.
Right. And when you were at Denton too, I think you came with me to SALT a couple times, but like, yeah, I mean, I had that, and that was also something because I was so curious about what's outside of the Martha Church. Like, because I didn't like liturgy for the longest time. I hated when Chris kept on doing this and that all the time in the altar. I was
Get
like,
all that smoke on you.
yeah, like too much smoke, man. Even though I want all the smoke now, but
dude, I went to Martha service. Sorry, I was gonna say I went to this past week. Man, that thing, it fogs up the whole place, dude. It's crazy. Like we walked into the just the common area, and there's so much fog. I'm like, this is crazy. Like,
it's like I don't remember this much smoke back then.
Yeah, it's wild. But
no,
Man, but you know the thing about InterVarsity is I feel like that's like the easy way out if you think about it. Because again, we were all a part of InterVarsity, kind of at our respective schools. But I feel like one of the main aspects is like we already knew people that were in it, and it was kind of people that were similar to us, like other Christian Indian people, right? So again, one thing is it's the easy way to go. It's just like, hey, it's a way to get established, a way to kind of meet other people, and kind of like a nice stepping stone into college. But I wish like I explored a little bit more because again, I feel like once you're kind of in that, like, you're kind of stuck, not stuck, but like, I don't know if y'all know kind of what I mean, but like that's kind of your friend group, right? And it's feel like it's a little difficult to kind of branch out because you're kind of now rooted into that. Like they kind of grab you and kind of like instill you into it. And then they try to get you to become like leader, like in small groups and things. And I have nothing against like the small groups I attended, the large groups I attended, like the friends that I made through kind of one way or SALT. But I wish that like I took the opportunity to kind of explore some of these other options because I had a lot of other Indian friends that were not a part of one way and they did their own thing and they just had a much different experience. So I don't know if y'all had any thoughts on that.
How long are they in prison for now? The
But
ones.
I think they're one's
Sinners.
Elon Musk and one's William Gates.
William Gates, the guy.
No, they were part of university.
William Gates is the grandfather of the guy from the National Treasure movies.
William Gates is Bill Gates. Bill's short for William, right?
I
Yeah,
understand. But William Gates was the main character's grandfather in the National Treasure movies. Just a fun fact. But anyways, let's go
throw that in there.
back to the college thing. But no, I agree. Like I joined SALT because the guys and girls older than I was, the seniors or super seniors that were there, they're the ones who convinced me, hey, you should come check this out. Because dude, you know what? So our Bible study was on Thursday. The only thing I did ever on Thursday was go to class and go play basketball. You know, I was just hooping it up, you know, with all the other Marthos and other people that was in the gym. But like, then I started attending because I'm just like, man, I should probably do something because I wasn't going to church on Sundays and I wasn't going back home on the weekends either. So I started attending and it was cool, man. And, you know, you see the same people, but like, I was always someone like, I knew that SALT and One Way and all these university stuff, I always knew from the beginning, even before I got into leadership on this Bible study, like, I knew this wasn't a church, but there were a lot of people in these groups that thought it was like a church and it was like super like, you know, you got to do this or you're a weirdo or you got to be a part of this every Thursday. You got to be a part of every small group or you're like a weirdo. And like, I always hated that because like we were saying before, like I never like forcing anything on myself. I don't like forcing anything else on anyone else. That was the biggest thing that I did not like.
That's fair. I mean, it's cool to hear y'all's point of views because y'all are like coming from like the member side and then the leader side. So, you know, for the people that didn't know, I was actually like full-time like campus minister with InterVarsity for a little bit. And I mean, you know, I definitely see all the viewpoints because like all of the South Asian InterVarsity chapters, they're all primarily like Malayali Christian. So it's like kind of what you grew up with. And it's kind of like, to be honest, like a cliquish mentality, right? Like you stick with your own people, you're not really branching out. But for us as the leaders, our goal was to have like this ministry be like the place where like other Indian people could come and be curious and learn about Jesus, right? Like that was always the intention, like the vision of it. But it's just very hard, right? Because there's so many different people coming into the room. Some people are coming in to learn about their faith and find friends. They're not really trying to like branch out and meet like other people that are different from them. Some people are, you know, focused on different things. There's just so many different spectrum of people that are coming that it was just hard for everyone to catch that vision, I would say. And it's just different because it's like you were saying, like no one wants to shove Jesus down their throats and stuff, and their mentality or their perception of us is already like, oh, these people are trying to convert me, blah blah blah. So it's just a whole weird chaos of things, I would say.
Does every I guess InterVarsity, do they have like a samosa and chai night? Because I feel like when I was at SALT we had that, when I was at One Way we had that, and I went to A&M, so we had Thrive down there, and I know we had that too. So I think it was like a time, like Chris was saying, to try to get like other Indian people, and there'll all be people from like different religion stuff to try to kind of get them in, and I feel like they would come for that, and really no one would. Then maybe like one or two people would join, and then they would attend like maybe a small group or a large group, but then they would kind of go their own way after that. So did every, I don't know, Chris, you may be a better one to answer. Like, is that like a thing that everyone was supposed to have, like samosa and chai night?
Yeah, I'm trying to think who started it. I don't know if it was One Way that first did it or if it was like
it wasn't One Way. One Way just stole everything from SALT, so I had no idea.
No, I think it's either One Way. It might have been SALT. It might have been. There's like some chapters in California and stuff too. But so whoever started it and did the first one, that just blew up. It became like a national thing. They call it Faith in Chai. So people all over the US do this thing, you know. But yeah, like Stan was saying, something like, you know, people come, people get samosas and they kind of dip, right? But it's I guess it's like you're trying to make an attempt to be like cultural and stuff too. But
I think that was mine.
It was your the funniest thing I was gonna say was like the whole SALT thing. So like when I came in, I don't know, there's like a whole story to it, but like I came in and like I was trying to help kind of branch it to be more like diverse and more multi-ethnic, right? To where like it could bring in different people groups, you know, not just Malayalis and Indians. So part of that, like we kind of had to change the name of SALT because it's like SALT was, you know, it's kind of like any brand, right? Like when you think of Apple, you think of this, right? Like that's what Apple is. So if you unless you change the name of Apple, you're always gonna associate it with that one thing, right? So that's kind of the same thing we were trying to do. We're trying to change the name. And so we became like Denton IV, which is like Denton University and stuff. And like part of it that like annoys me with Christian people sometimes is like they focus on like the wrong things sometimes, you know. So this one person, I'm not saying their name, I'm trying to be like Abby, but I remember I told them like, oh, we're changing the name and stuff, and they were like, oh my god, like we're changing the name, like we got to get the whole crew back together, and we got to make sure we're aware of this. And I was like, the fuck, dude, like that's so stupid. Like, it's first of all, this is a fucking name. Second of all, like that's not what this is about. You know, it's just a damn name. Like it just pissed me off so much that people cared about that. You know, it's like we're trying to do this whole thing and you're focused on like these I don't know. I'm not saying like that's everybody, but there's just certain people focus on these little things that become big things and like kind of ruin the whole vibe and culture of what you're trying to do. So
yeah, man, I mean that's crazy. But you know, one thing that kind of bothers me about what you just said, Chris, is that like these like little name changes and all that stuff, I agree with you. That's not what the point of the whole thing. The whole point is like teaching this young adults like the Bible, kind of teaching them what's right and wrong. Kind of what I always said when I was part of these Ivy groups or these Bible study groups was that you're teaching people or giving people the tools to know what's right and wrong. At the end of the day, we're all in college. We're all going to make decisions, and that's something we have to live with the consequences, or reap the rewards in a sense. With the story you just said, I hate that you guys went through that, because at the same time, it's not about the name. Why is it even a big deal that you guys you can name it to just ABC or XYZ, whatever it is, it should still the same concept keeps going. And dude, that's what bothered me when I was there a lot of times, because when I was a freshman, they had asked me to join leadership, and I was like, hell no, I'm not joining leadership. I'm not getting involved in this. I just want to attend whenever I have free time, focus on my school stuff, and then move on with my life. But then like something kept on like calling, because, and I'm just gonna say, like during that time in Salt, there was a lot of Pentecostals, and one reason like they really wanted me on the team because I was Martham. I brought like a different perspective, but I didn't see it that way. I'm just like, well, y'all just want to fill your little like surveys, like, oh, we have one Martham guy. Like I never wanted that, but the guy that really convinced me, I'm not gonna say any names or anything like that, but he was just like really good about. I mean, there's obviously some bad things that he kind of did that I was like, I'm not really, about that, but the main overall thing, he was a good friend of mine. He was a cool dude. He was just real with everything. So I was like, like I can try. I'll just apply for it, right? So there was two teams, a servant team and then like exec team, right? So I'm like, I'll just jump on servant team and just greet people at the door and get the hell out of there, right? But they put me on exec team right off the bat. So me and Chris's sister Chrissy were one of the first freshmen to go straight from as a freshman attendee to straight on the exec team. So I was like, oh wow, this is crazy. But my one thing from sophomore year all the way to like senior year was that I never wanted to lie to anybody. Like I still went out, I still went to house parties, I still went to apartment parties, I still went to everything, but I also attended everything too, because the reason I felt that was not saying like, I'm not encouraging everyone to go to parties right now. I'm just saying like, I wanted to bridge the gap. I wanted to be like, hey, I go to this thing, but I also go to this thing. And I'm not saying that thing as like, oh, you should have one foot in the world and one foot out. I'm not saying anything. I'm just saying like, sometimes like in that situation, it wasn't about like a church or anything. It was about just, what we said before, teaching people the tools of what's right and wrong. So I always felt like if I was in both situations, like if I was out at Fry Street or if I was out at a house party, but then the next Thursday I was at Bible study, that showed people like, okay, he's at both events and he's normal in both areas, like he can function in both areas. So yeah, like, and I'm sure people are watching are like probably thinking opposite, which I don't blame you. That's your opinion, you're entitled to that. But for me, I always felt like the more I was at both events, the more I show people, hey, I'm a normal guy, you can attend this and you can attend that. But there's a balance. And I'll be the first one, I was never perfect in both areas.
I agree with you 100% there, because I know a couple of schools that I went to, like they were very strict. Like I know like seniors will be very strict on the freshmen, like, hey, don't go out, don't drink, like, don't do any of these things. That they get mad if like people did that. And I would tell them like, hey, I'd much rather like I would take them out, because I was like, hey, I'd much rather them go out with me and like I can see like what they're doing. Like I'm not kind of like watch over them and stuff, but just like I'd rather them do it with me than like get fucked up with some random people, right? And then like what like those people aren't going to take care of them, right? But the same thing with if like one of the kids gets like drunk or things like that, they know like the older guys are going to take care of them, right? And I had a couple of people where the freshmen, like, they would go out, they would get wasted, and nothing there probably is wrong with it. You probably shouldn't be doing that. But the nice thing is, the older guys or girls, they're like, hey, call us at any time and we'll pick you up. Like, we want to make sure at the end of the day, we may be a little upset if you're disappointed, but like at the end of we want to make sure you get home safe. Right. So it's always nice to kind of have that fellowship and things like that there. Again, I'm in the mindset where you're okay, you be smart about it, right? Like go out, have fun. I expected you, I'd be like, I think you can do both, right? I think you can go out, have fun, and attend like large groups, small groups. And there's nothing hypocritical about that. But I think some of these leaders and some of these, individuals thought that it's either one or the other. You can't kind of do both or kind of split the difference.
Yeah, I don't know if it's like because we grew up in the South too, like it's so conservative here, right? So I don't know if that's part of it, but I mean, I'll be honest, like me growing up, I feel like I was very conservative in my viewpoints, like that's what I was taught, it's like either you're going to heaven or hell, there's no in between. So even like in college, like my first few years, I didn't really drink that much. And I guess I kind of thought it was like a sin or something. I didn't judge people that did it, like I tried to be still understanding, right? Because it's like, people are in college, this is what they want to do. And I guess that's like one of my biggest regrets, or not biggest regrets, that's kind of intense, but like, it's one of my regrets where it's like, I wish I didn't kind of have that like viewpoint in my life for myself and like thinking of faith that way, because I feel like that limits like even Jesus, thinking that Jesus can only love you if you're perfect kind of thing. So a part of me like kind of regrets that, just because like you guys are saying, right? It's your life, right? Like God should love it to the fullest thing. And I think when people like would be like, oh, like you can't do this and you can't do that, like it just makes it to where people want to not get to know Jesus or not want to have this relationship, right? Because they're like, oh, like I can't have fun and stuff. And so I definitely had that kind of thought process, but now I'm definitely like, way more open-minded and stuff. And I think part of it too that I don't like about like just Christianity too is like certain people that do the stuff and then they'll like judge people when they do it, or like certain people that did the stuff, they stop doing it because they now think it's like a revelation that like, oh, like, like you shouldn't be doing these kind of things, right? And they judge other people that do it. Like that's like one of the biggest things that annoys me about like Christianity, like I think you shouldn't judge anyone regardless if you did it or if you didn't do it. So when people do that kind of stuff, or people like put shame on people with stuff like that, that really like irks me a lot. And so that's like honestly one of the things that like turns me away from like just not like Jesus but like Christianity, and sometimes because I'm just like, man, like why are people like just so judgmental, so that's always a tough part for me.
Yeah, I mean that's a great point, man. Because I struggle with that too, because like I don't like people judging, like, and I'm not saying I've never judged anyone. I'm not saying that. It's just like there's a lot of people that love to just pick on other people's faults, but they never want to like pick on their own faults. The older I've gotten, I realize like I don't care about a lot of people's business. Like the older I'm getting, like if for example, if there's like certain like gossip or certain things that's happening in another like couple's life or another person's life, like if I hear about it, oh, okay, cool. I'll just pray for them or whatever. But like I don't really care to like hear about anything, because I'm so worried about my own faults. Because I feel like the more you grow in faith, you start asking God, like, what is wrong? Like, what's the things that I can work on, God? Like, and I feel like God will slowly show you through time. And that's what I'm worried about. Like my morning prayers, like I'll go to the gym and in the sauna, I'll do my morning prayer. It's kind of a weird 2-in-1 combo. But so I'll pray. I was like, God, help me be a better person than I was yesterday, for my today and for my, if I have a tomorrow, like for, my family, for myself. And like I just try to pray, like, God, like take away friends out of my life that doesn't need to be there, take away or put in people that needs to be there, put people's names on my heart that I should reach out or whatever. And yeah, for a long time I was doing that. And then even now it's like sometimes I kind of, this is probably the selfish part I may fall into, is that like I'm thinking about myself a lot. I'm just like, okay, how can I be better in my business? How can I be better on the podcast? How can I be better, as a friend, brother, husband, whatever? And so yeah, man, like my biggest thing is like I try not to judge like people. I just try to give them the benefit of the doubt, kind of hear their stories, because you never know like what people are going through. Like you guys may have seen Will Smith recently, or on yesterday or the day before's episode of on Trevor Noah, and Will Smith was just like on there. And I'm not saying what he did was right or wrong. I'm just saying like, man, like he admitted he was going through a lot of stuff. And So my biggest advice to anybody listening to this, any young person, like, hear people out, hear people's stories. Even if they're right or wrong, just hear them out. Like, it's another perspective. Me saying that, I did want to go into post-college. Like, did you guys like miss the whole one-way salt, or let's just say InterVarsity overall? Like, did you guys miss that aspect, or did you try to carry it when you guys went back to your home churches? Like, how was that experience? Like,
Yeah, I mean, I think it's different. Again, I was never a leader or anything in Salt or One Way or Thrive like when I was there. So I was more of the member. So I guess when I came back, it's a weird aspect because then you're kind of too old for like the youth league. You're not like, I mean, you're still in the youth league, but it's just like a weird way to view it because, now you're kind of the one to kind of instill that into the kind of the younger generation. So again, the way I instill that is, again, I think through sports, right? So again, even to this day, when I initially kind of came back from college, we play a lot of flag football, we would play a lot of basketball. So kind of in those aspects, we would try to instill kind of just, I'm all about just doing the right thing, right? Again, I don't care if you pray, every night before you go to bed, if you read the Bible every single day, but I think if you can just be a good person day in and day out, I think that just means a lot at the end of the day, right? So just kind of do the right things, be a good person. And again, viewed in many ways, like what is good, and things like that. But again, I think a lot of people know just kind of doing the right things, helping people out, giving a smile to somebody else. Just, I think life is too short to kind of have kind of these negative views and outlooks and just try to be positive. I think there's, some people call me too positive sometimes because, I remember when I was in PA school, one of the things I always tell people is like, hey, what's the worst that's gonna happen? Like, I told one of my friends, like, literally the worst thing that's gonna happen is we're gonna fail our test, we're gonna fail out of PA school, and we're gonna go back home. And that's literally the worst thing that can happen. But at the end of the day, that may happen, but life moves on, right? Like we can be sad about it for a little bit. It's okay to kind of mourn and kind of reflect on kind of what happened, but it's not something that we can live with for the rest of our life, right? We can learn the lessons from like why that happened and kind of use it to move forward. And I tell people, hey, I actually go in with like, hey, what's the worst outcome that can happen? And this is the worst thing that happened, but my life's still going to move on. Like the world's not going to stop like spinning. The days are going to keep going. And you can't just like halt your whole life because of one bad thing that happened. So I think just being a good person and being positive is really the biggest thing that I tell people to kind of do day in and day out. I don't know if that answered your question or not, but
Dang, I wish your perspective is crazy. I wish I had that kind of perspective because I live too much with regret, so I can't. I mean, I think some of the things you said, like I can agree with, but some of it, I'm like, ugh. I feel like I would always like it would always be in the back of my mind. But I respect that. I wish I thought
oh
that
no, don't
way.
get me wrong. I think it took a long time for me to get here to where I am now, right? There's so many things like in college that I regretted doing that I used to be able to say, I wish I could have a time machine and go back and kind of fix those mistakes. But now I try to see that, hey, all of those things, like, those bad things that may have happened, you learn something from it, right? And then you use that to better yourself going forward, better other people going forward. Now my mindset to kind of change. Like even right now, like let's say, I get fired from my job, right? So for whatever reason, I lose my job, it's okay for me to be sad about it, but at the end of the day, like I can't just sit around and mope and cry because I've lost my job, right? I gotta eventually get back and start applying for jobs, kind of reaching out, network, things like that. So you always have to like, I'm not saying it's a bad thing to mourn and kind of be sad about kind of what happened, but you can't stay on that for a long period of time. But again, it's not an easy thing to do, or it's not easy to have that mindset. I think it took a lot of, things that have happened to kind of get to where I am now.
Yeah, I mean, I guess when I think about like post college, I guess my life was a little different. So I did ministry for like 3-4 years, and like, so I feel like I guess I was still part of. I mean, I guess I was part of InterVarsity, still doing that. Yeah, I mean, it was definitely a good experience. I learned a lot. I guess sometimes, if I'm being real, like, and like looking back at my life, I kind of wish I didn't do full time ministry, and like that's kind of its own like full conversation, full topic. Like it definitely had its good, but I think I don't know. I just wonder like what life would be like if I didn't do it full time. And if people that know InterVarsity and how it is when you're a full time person, like you kind of understand the hardships with it, and so part of that. But for me, like, I guess if I'm thinking after university and like, I guess I'm like fully done with that part, I was super burnt out, like I didn't really like, like get super involved in church. Like, I'm just kind of like, damn, like I was doing this for so long and like poured so much of my heart and soul into this stuff. And I guess for me even too, like I guess I'm still kind of like working through it and stuff. Like I just felt like it was a little dark for me, like where I was like, I don't really like when I was pushing like, loving people, loving this and stuff. And now I'm kind of like, I'm kind of about myself. And I think it's part of like my healing where I need to like focus on like, hey, like how can I like see like love myself, but also understand how God loves me instead of like trying to like spread that with other people, So like part of that is like that journey of figuring that out. I think it's also the hardship for me too, is just seeing everything in the world and like seeing just all the issues and the systemic issues that's happening, right? So like with the churches, with like races and just all that stuff. Like it's hard because I think a lot of it is religion that impacts it, and I think religion is intended to be good, but it divides a lot of people. And so sometimes for me, it's hard because I kind of harp on that and I kind of see that too much. And I guess like a lot of it is like, I love Jesus, but I don't know if I really love his people as much because I think, and it's not like to say like, oh, like every Christian is bad, but it's just, we're all innately like have like the desire to do like evil, because that's just how I guess we were created, or not create, not like God created us that way, but like that's just what happened when everything in the Bible happened, right?
Yeah,
But
the sin in us. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So I think that's just how I viewed it. But I still, now I think my focus is like on my family, right? Like so me and Amy, me and my future daughter. I don't know if I announced on the podcast, but I'm having a daughter. But like that's like my focus now, right? It's like how do I make this household like be like understand who God is, and also like Stan was saying, like love people, take care of people, care for people, and like be positive in the world, right? Like that's kind of what I
Mhm.
try to strive for now.
So, Chris, I did want to ask you, as you were saying, like you're in a kind of a journey of like kind of finding that own healing. Are you kind of close to that healing or that finding, or is it still like, I mean, it might be a lifetime journey for you, but like, do you feel like you've gotten better from where you started?
Oh man, I don't know. I mean, I have my moments, moments where I feel like it's good, moments where it's not. I think it's just like, like I definitely, like I was doing like counseling and stuff, and that definitely helped too. So I think it's more like you're saying, like it's gonna take some time for me, but it's also like looking at it differently too, right? Like where it's like before I was doing ministry full time, now that's just not realistic in my like season of life. Like I'm, working and having a family, and obviously some people do it, but I just don't think I'm gonna be able to do that. And so figuring out like how do I live as a Christian when it's not like my full-time job anymore. And so I think I'm still trying to figure that out. But like there's certain people that I've, grew to know in ministry or just as friends, where I remember they would do ministry and they would like completely like 180 switch off and do something else. And at the time I was like, man, like that's so weird. Like, why are they like that? Like they were so good at this. They were such a influence here. But now I relate, it's like when something like pulls so much out of you, like and you kind of get out of that phase, it's kind of hard to get back into it, So I think I'm still figuring it out, but like you were saying, right? It's like everybody has their like journey and kind of freak timing with that. So
It's true, man. And I think for me, like after college, after my experience with university, and I wouldn't say I had a bad or good experience. It was right in the middle. I felt like I was there for a reason. I used to have thoughts too. It's like, man, maybe I should never have joined. But when I also look back on now, I think there was a reason why I was a part of it, a reason why I was there for the time I was there. And even now, like some of my good friends are still from that school, from that group. And so in that sense, no regrets. But I think for me, after I wanted to learn, I wanted to take everything I learned and bring it back to our Marthma church, and that's why I was still very involved, like real fast, because I think I missed like our I guess I want to say original group or our youth league, because that's where my heart always was. Like even though I was away for a long time, and I felt like, oh, maybe I'll never need to come back. And there's rumors out there that I hated the Marthma church. I don't think I ever hated it. I think it was just me that I didn't like. I just want to see what else is out there. I'll say that. And maybe I've said I hated it because I've heard rumors that people have told me that I said I hated it, but I don't think I ever said it something like that. But I think for me, like being part of the church was like a good experience, and just kind of connecting with the youth, and even that church, like a lot of my good friends came out of it. But one thing I just always struggled with the church was this like this idea you have to be perfect, and I never liked that idea when we're in college, pre-college and post-college, it's like my biggest belief was like you should show people like our failures. You should show people that we're not perfect people. And I think our community doesn't touch on that a lot. Like they try to hide all your imperfections. They try to hide and shove it under a rug and stuff like that. And for me, like you mentioned this a little bit, Chris, but I was going to counseling too for a long time just to kind of deal with my own personal things in my mind and talk it out with someone professionally, instead of like, because I had a lot of friends that I would go to, but I always felt bad that I was venting to them because they probably have their own problems and this and that. So might as well just go to a professional and not worry about how that person felt. So
you know what I tell people? I tell people, church is not a place, it's a people, right? So at the end of the day, it's not like a physical place that we have to go to. It's just a group of people that can have fellowship and things like that. And I know one thing you mentioned, Abby, is just kind of wishing we still had that fellowship. And I think we do, right? It just may take a different form. Like we're not all physically going to church together. Let's think of our kind of, when we play basketball or when we do our fantasy football kind of group chats and things like that. I think that's in one way like a fellowship of kind of church. I think that's a church in itself, right? It's like not probably the form of church that most people kind of expect, but we talk about random things. I mean, it's always kind of about the good things that we can do. We always kind of harp on each other and things like that. But at the end of the day, there's that fellowship there that we don't have to talk about Jesus in our group chats and things like that. But we know that core of it's there, right? Like that's the reason we're all together in the first place, right? It was like the place church that turned us into the people church.
Man, one thing I was thinking about, guys, like so all of our obviously not most, but all of our parents came here from India, right? And like the one thing they had was barely any money in their pocket, but they had like faith and prayer with them all the time. So they're the reason that we went to church, and they're the ones that kind of started that in us and all of us in a sense. But the one thing I've noticed is that like even though with our parents we had family prayer, they took us to church every Sunday, they did everything that they could to teach us the Bible. The older that we've all gotten, I feel like we're not, in my opinion, this is just really my opinion, so nobody take it as offense, but I just feel like we're not as strong as our parents were or like their generation before them, because I feel like we're so comfortable sometimes. Like, I mean, our parents, our grandparents, our great-grandparents, they were walking miles and miles just to go to school. And they were like working these crazy jobs at a young age in India and then working worse jobs here in America. And they just built their, I like to say, empires to give us what we have today. And now we're like in a lot better situations than like, most people because our parents sacrifice. And I always feel like sometimes like we've kind of sit back and just kind of not do the things that we should be doing. Like, and I'm not saying this is not, maybe this sounds judgmental, so forgive me guys, or preachy. This is not what I'm trying to come across. I'm just emphasizing like, man, we don't do as much as our parents. And like, I feel like now, like, I always like to ask myself, like, where is everyone? And that's meaning like, do people still are attending these youth events, or people still attending the Martha Church or the Ortho Church, Catholic Church? Are we losing our youths? Are we kind of moving away from that? Like, I just kind of wanted to get your thoughts on that.
I think it's difficult for us because, again, our parent lives and our lives are completely different. So again, I think they had to struggle so much. Like all they really had was their faith and hard work, right? So, and again, I think we've all seen examples of both of those, right? We've seen the examples of our parents kind of do family prayers almost every night, going to church every Sunday, forcing us to go, things like that. And then you see them kind of juggle that, raising kids, and kind of going to job, right? So they kind of work nonstop. And I think we really don't have as much of a struggle as they did, right? So again, by the time they're our age, right, they probably had, I'm sure your parents already had 2 kids. My parents had 1 kid that was probably 4 or 5 at the same age that we are right now. So their lives and our lives are completely different. So I think I don't think their struggles will ever completely grasp. And I think one thing that they had to rely on was their faith, right? The faith that everything would kind of be okay. I think for us, we saw how much faith that they had, but again, unless we're going through kind of the struggle that they did, I don't think we can ever kind of get to the level that they were. I think even if we can get a fraction of what they were, I think that's going to be a good thing. But I think struggle and faith kind of go hand in hand with each other. Again, I'm speaking for myself. Again, I've gone through things in my life, but I don't think I've ever gone through, moving across the world with barely any money in our pocket, raising a family, that kind of struggle to have to rely on faith like our parents did. All that being said, that allowed us they did exactly what they intended to do. They wanted to give us the freedom to not have the struggle like they did. So we have the freedom to choose kind of our own path in our spirituality, right? So again, I think a lot of our parents would have appreciated if we stayed kind of within kind of the Martha Church, things like that. But at the end of the day, I think as long as we're good Christians, at least from my point, they don't care exactly, what denomination, things like that. As long as you're a good Christian boy or man, I think that's what matters at the end of the day to most parents. And then some parents want, them to stay within the denomination to marry somebody that's within that same denomination. But at least my parents specifically, they just want me to be a good Christian and me to kind of be with a good Christian and have good Christian faith as well.
Okay, I feel like that's like a whole different conversation that we can get into.
Yeah, well, we'll save that for a part two.
There's a lot of stuff there, but no, I mean, I agree with y'all. Like, I definitely think like every generation's different and stuff. I think our parents, like, because I mean, like it makes sense, right? Like our parents came with nothing and they built like this life here. We came here, but they built it for us. So like we didn't experience the struggle and the hardships like what we experienced. Our hardships are different, man. Like I think we definitely had hardships, but it's just different. It's not like what they went through. And ours, I guess, quote unquote, you could also say like we didn't need faith almost for that. Like we do, but like I guess we thought we could do it on our own. And maybe that's part of our generation's mentality where we think we can do things and, we don't need to rely on other people or, whatever that might be. Part of it is that like the difference too is like I think our parents, their level of respect for their parents were different too. Not saying like we aren't respectful. I mean, there's generations after us that aren't respectful. That's a whole different thing. But like our parents, like I think, their parents would force them to go to church and stuff. And I don't know, maybe it was just different then, but like they like enjoyed that. They did that and they understood that's part of the family. But I think when our parents forced us or some, people in our generation, like they didn't receive it the same way, right? Like they're like, oh my God, I got to go to church for 4 hours, or I got to go to this thing. I got to go to that thing. My parents are forcing me to do this. Maybe it's just because of the generational difference, but like, I think all that forcing at a young age makes us look at church kind of negatively, or it makes us look at Christianity as like, man, like something like when your connotation with Christianity is like, oh, like this is boring almost, right? And I think that's kind of what happened with us. And like, some of it might be on our parents, but it's also like you guys were saying, they were juggling so much shit that it's hard for them to also raise us and like understand like where we're coming from, because their point of view is so different. And the other thing I was going to say too is like even like with just faith in general, like if you look at the generations over time, like everybody wants something different, right? Like in our parents' age, like the big like Christian movement was like those like the gospel, like you see like Billy Graham, right? Like everything was about sharing the gospel and sharing this, and it was like more of like I guess theology where like people really wanted to understand like is compared to science, is this true or whatever, right? Then our time I feel like was more about like this relationship, this like who is Jesus and like what does that love mean to us, right? So it's like kind of like the generation of like how like what God means or what that relationship with God means look different too. So I wonder if that impacted it. So I think, yeah, the generations definitely, from my point of view, I feel like that probably has a lot to do with it, but that's just kind of what I was thinking when you were asking that. So
I think for me, one thing I was taught is that, or one thing I learned along the way is that this whole thing, it's not, to me, I don't see it as a religion. I see it as a relationship. And I think that's the biggest difference. And Chris, what you were saying, like now we know a little bit better than our parents did, because like I think our parents, sometimes it could be, what's the word? Like it could be religious. It could be,
legalism.
like as a habit, repetitive. Like those are things that they may have grown up because it was more they kind of had to do. And I think it's very like I encourage everyone to sit down, pray, meditate. And some of the things, one thing I learned recently is that prayer is like what you tell God, and meditate what you take some time to listen to God. And I think that's a lot of times we're just talking and like I think like sometimes we just need to listen. And that's in every situation with our spiritual life, our family life, whatever life. Sometimes just listening can help in a lot of ways, in a lot of aspects of our lives. But one thing that always bothered me with the church is that like the older, and I can only speak from like maybe how I grew up, and I think we were okay in our generation, but I feel like a lot of uncles and aunties throughout any denomination of the church always say, hey, the youth are the future. But I think a lot of times you see today's world that the youth are leaving the churches, and it's because they weren't getting catered to, or it was because it's their parents' church, or that statement of we're the future never came to pass because they didn't allow it to pass because they wanted to have this strong grip. That's just my opinion, because I feel like now you see the repercussions because of the pandemic, because of just certain uncles and aunties just continue to want that power. You see the youth leaving. And I read an article, a lot of time when the youth and people leave the church, it's not like they go to another church. Some people do, but some people just kind of fall off. And like I said before, this is not me judging anyone. This is just some things I've noticed through my friends groups, things I've noticed with people in general. Just that's one thing. Like I think our youth have kind of dissipated because just certain things that's happened in our lifetime.
I think the youth, I think you're right there. I think the youth are leaving, but it's one of those things, again, I think it's people that we know, like our friend groups, things like that, they're leaving, right? But I think we're also missing the other aspect is as our youth are leaving, there's other youth that are just coming from India and they're immigrating kind of in, and they're kind of replacing kind of the youth that was there. And then kind of the youth that was kind of already there is kind of growing a little bit older and they're taking on the mantles of being the leaders and things like that. So again, I think there's a lot more younger leaders kind of growing up because of that too. So the people that were already there that can't leave on their own yet are kind of forced into the role of being leaders for kind of the new people that are coming too. So I think there's pros and cons to both, right? Again, I think we're just seeing kind of the one aspect of, hey, everyone's leaving, all the youth is leaving. But again, if we take a step back and look at the bigger picture, that may not be the case, right? Again, as a lot of youth leaving, more people may be coming in, there's new leaders being formed. Again, I don't think overnight the churches are going to close. I don't think anytime soon, like there's 4 or 5 Martha churches. I'm just saying Martha in general.
The Martha will never die.
Yeah. So again, there's always kind of new people coming in. I think I really didn't think of that until we were kind of sitting here talking about it. It's like, yeah, youth are leaving, but because I was thinking about like when I played basketball or something with the church guys the other day, there's so many people that I've never seen before. Like, who are these people? And they're like, oh, this family just came from India, blah, blah. And that got me thinking, it's like, man, like as many people that I know are leaving, there's people that are replacing them, right? And then they have, family of 4, family of 5, and a lot of them are like youth, like little kids, and then they're kind of growing up and becoming kind of the new youth. And once they get to the college age, they might leave, but again, somebody's going to come from India or somebody's going to immigrate, and it's that circle of life. It's just kind of always going to repeat itself.
I guess, yeah, like if you look at that perspective, like from other people's point of view, like you could see it that way. I guess one thing I would say from like a devil's advocate kind of way is like, let's say like, the people like for us, like we all grew up in the same church. There's uncles and aunties that like, invest in us, right? Like they might have helped in like Sunday school, VBS, retreats. Like they might have just came and like served in some kind of capacity, right? And then like we go to college, and then after that we're like out of their whole life. And so I guess from my point of view, when I think about it in that way, it's like for them, like they invested all of this in us, and then we just leave. It's kind of like, oh, like they might feel like, oh, like all that effort I did and it's just kind of gone. Or it's like, oh, like these ungrateful kids, like they're not coming back. Like I guess that's like the other side of it that I can see. But it's like that's like their perspective, right? Because it's like they were invested so much into us that's what they feel like. That doesn't mean like what they did was wrong or what we did is wrong. It's just, like maybe when we came back, we felt like, we wanted to move to a different city, or we wanted to go and check this other church out or other, Bible study out. It's just not like it's like the church's fault. It's just like, everybody changes, and like the way you worship might look different. I think it's just that. But
well, like I was saying before, like the church is not a place, it's a people, right? And I think we may not be giving back to church place that helped grow us up, but we're giving back to the people kind of in a different way. Let's just use this podcast as an example, right? So we're talking about faith, things like that. And again, they may reach out to an audience. People that were at our church are probably like the young kids from our church probably watching this, right? And again, they may learn some lessons that the older people taught us, but they're just hearing it in a different way than us physically being kind of there, right? It's like the people that are the church. I guess if that makes sense. Again, I agree with you, Chris. I was just being a devil's advocate.
So we got two devils in here. Okay, so I'm the angel then.
Oh, you're for sure not the angel.
Alongside my Backrow Boys, Stan and Chris, we just want to thank you guys for joining us on this episode. And like I always say, stay safe, stay classy, and thanks for joining us in the back row. Peace.